Hey guys, and welcome to the first video in my series covering technical concepts for non-technical founders. My goal here is to help bridge the gap on some important technical concepts and make them easy to understand for non-technical people, whether you just work in the tech industry or you want to make an app or start a startup. The big thing is that you don't know what you don't know, and that's what I'm trying to resolve with this series, is to go over some technical stuff where even if you don't know how to code, you'll still have a good fundamental understanding of some important stuff. So basically, this series will help you avoid some of the common pitfalls, as well as getting ripped off by a contractor or an agency if you're going to go that route. If you're not familiar with the 80-20 rule, you can look it up, but it basically goes around, you get 80% of the results with 20% of the effort, which is what I'm going for here, where with a few short videos, you can get a nice, solid, fundamental understanding. So some of the topics we're going to go over in this series are over here, but this image really summarizes what I'm going for here, where you have a person who they don't know the difference between something that takes maybe a couple hours to do programming versus something that's nearly impossible to do while programming. So my goal is to bridge that gap and kind of give you a better idea of these concepts and stuff like that. In this video, we're going to cover the 3-tier app architecture, which is a common kind of way to build apps. We're also going to go over programming language trade-offs. So if you're working with an agency, you can understand if the language that they use is good for what you want to do. We'll also go over the cloud, what it is, and some of the pros and cons, hybrid versus native apps, and the trade-offs between those, and then just some other core concepts, as well as if any viewers have any requests in the comments, I can cover those as well. So why should you listen to me? Before I jump into explaining this stuff, is that I'm self-taught. I started off non-technical doing marketing and stuff, and I just got tired of having ideas for apps, and eventually I just went through the whole process of learning to code because I wanted to be able to take care of it myself. So I understand what it's like to be non-technical. Actually, the thing that motivated me the most was I went in to talk to a software agency, and just going over some of the topics, I just felt like an idiot because I didn't understand. I didn't know what a database was. I didn't know what a front-end framework was, stuff like that. And I could tell they were just looking at me like I was an idiot who didn't know anything. So I think that gives me a little bit better understanding to teach this stuff compared to the average software engineer. They can't really relate to that non-technical person. They don't know what it's like to not know this stuff. So that's where I'm coming from this tutorial. So moving on to the 3-tier web architecture. Basically, it's broken down into 3 main areas. The first is the client, which is how, as a user, you're going to be working with the app. So a client example would be either a web browser like Chrome, or also like a mobile app, which would be an Android app or an iOS app. So that's how users are going to be working with it. In between is the server, which is basically handling logic. It's going to be communicating between the client and the database. It handles stuff like creating a user account. If you're on Reddit, it'd handle like an upvote. It would take that information from the client, and it would then update for that specific post the upvote count, and it would update that. The database, at its simplest, it basically stores the data, and you can think of a relational database kind of like a advanced spreadsheet, which has columns and rows, and it holds different types of values. So first thing we're going to look at is the client, but before we jump into all this, I think the best way to learn is with something kind of relatable and that will get you thinking in the proper mindset. So we're going to look at Reddit, and the way to think is to stop thinking like a user and to start thinking kind of more how things actually are working on the technical back end. So let's just work through kind of how things are going on behind the scenes when we go to Reddit. Once you enter that URL, what's happening is that it's sending a request from your browser or really from your mobile app, and it's going to request the Reddit homepage. Now, because these results are dynamic, so depending on if you're logged in or whether you're logged out, it's going to send you different results based on your preferences if you're logged in, or if you're not logged in, it's going to send you results based on their ranking algorithm, which takes into account stuff like upvotes, how long ago it was posted, stuff like that. So Like I said earlier, the server is essentially a middleman. So if I try to upvote this now, you'll see it'll pop this up, and it won't allow me to do that. The reason is that the server can obviously tell when I send that request. It's kind of got like your name attached is the way to think about it. So it's like a note card. You say, I want to upvote, and you attach your name, and they're going to look at this, and it's going to say, okay, this person isn't logged in, so it's going to reject that request. Some other ways that authorization comes into account is the highest level would be something like an admin. They could come and delete any of these posts. If you're just a user, you can only delete your own posts and your own comments. So basically everything has its own unique ID, like this thread. If you look at the URL, you can see there's a 6-digit ID at the bottom there, and that basically says that's how they will account upvotes to that thread as well as the comments, so they know which ones those are attached to. So when you do something like upvote, what's going on is that if you're logged in, it'll send that request. You can think about it like basically it's sending a message to the server that you want to upvote it, and if it's authorized, it'll be passed on to the database, and it'll update this value that's attached to the thread ID. So basically, if I were to upvote this, instead of being, let's say it's a 1700 flat, it'd then be that value in the database would be then updated to 1701, and then anybody who sees this thread when they request that ID, it would get returned back to them with a new updated value. So now you kind of have an idea, general idea how this works behind the scenes. So now we'll jump back into the slideshow and get a better idea of the more technical stuff. So basically, like I said earlier, the client is how the users interact with your application. To make the front end, which is what's in the browser, it's known as a front end. So you're going to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. For your mobile apps, you're going to be using Swift for iOS or Java for Android. And there's also several frameworks which for making hybrid apps, which basically allow you to use these same technologies, the HTML, JavaScript, stuff like that, to make mobile apps. And earlier I said for future topics, this is one of the things I'll be covering, which is hybrid apps. There's some trade-offs. The main benefit being that you save costs because you can effectively use the same code base for all of them, but there are trade-offs, which I'll cover in depth in another video. Next up is the server, which basically it handles requests from the client, and it acts as a middleman or kind of a bouncer based on if you have the authorization. It determines what you can do and stuff like that. Some examples: create user accounts, log in, validate data that you've submitted, and then sends data to the database. Going in further, there's different types. There's web versus app server. So some two common servers or web servers are Apache and Nginx. Basically, the web server is going to handle most of the static content, which would be like images or blog posts, stuff that doesn't change. The reason it does this is that you want your web server to handle as much stuff as possible because it's generally much faster than your app server. So whenever possible, you want your content to be served from the web server. The app server is what handles the dynamic content. So like when we're on Reddit or if you're on Facebook, that's what handles getting your custom news feed based on your preferences, your friends, whatever. The app server will then pull in the data depending on whatever from the database. So the stuff when you have your custom username and it shows up in the top corner of your page, that is what's coming in from the app server. That's what's handling it, your custom news feed. Some examples, basically there's frameworks for app servers for every programming language. For JavaScript you have Express, Python you have Django, and PHP you have something like Laravel. Moving on to the final layer is the database layer. So effectively what it does is it stores raw data. The newer thing is called NoSQL, NoSQL, however you want to pronounce it. Traditionally, databases have been used. They're called relational databases, and they used SQL. And like I said earlier, they're similar to a spreadsheet. SQLs generally they're more mature. They've been used for decades, so you benefit from that in that way, but NoSQL does have some use cases where it might be superior. I might cover that in depth on my video on databases. I'll probably go into these use cases. But basically, that's all I'm going to cover for 3-tier web architecture. If you like the series and you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe. I'll be putting out those videos over the next couple days. If you have any suggestions or topics you want me to cover, just comment below, and I'll be sure to try to cover those if possible if there's a lot of people asking for the same topic. But for now, that's it. Thanks.